So here's the question. If you are constantly there, the one who's there for all of your friends, all of your family, the people at work, the people in your community, and you're always there to provide support when they need it, when is it your turn? You may be pretty resilient. You've dealt with a lot of change, especially these past 5 years. So much has been happening. And, you've learned how to handle it. You've learned how to roll because you've dealt with a lot of things in your life, because you've got certain practices in your life. And because you're able to deal with things, you may be the person everyone turns to for support when they're feeling pressure, when they're uh, feeling overwhelmed by what's going on. And it may be your family members that are coming to you, your friends, the people at work, people in your community. They're all coming to you because they know that you're the one who's always the strong one, who can always deal with things, and who knows how to roll with what's happening. The challenge with this is you can always put yourself last because you're always doing for others. Now, I don't care how strong you are. We all at some point need to take a breather, to have a soft place to land where you can take the weight of the world off you and just be. And here's the challenge. If you don't have this, if you uh, are constantly there for everybody else, that resilience, that strength you have isn't going to stay there. It will start to erode. You won't notice it bit by bit. It will start to fade away. You may start just feeling a little more tired, a little more of that weight on you. You may start feeling, if someone's asking for you for your help, just that initial okay, you have to take a breath before you can do it. So here's the question. If you are constantly there, the one who's there for all of your friends, all of your family, the people at work, the people in your community, and you're always there to provide support when they need it, when is it your turn? When do you get to replenish and nourish yourself? Or does that keep getting deferred over and over and over and over again because you're always trying to support and help everybody else in your life? We're just into a new year at the time of this recording. So let's take a look back. Think about the last year, the things that you've done, the things you've accomplished. Think back to the year before, the goals that you had laid out. Had you set out intentions to do more for yourself, to do more things for you, because you were always doing for others, putting others first, right? Let's take a really objective look at this. I started out as a scientist. I'm still very scientific about this in many, many ways. So if you are looking at this last year, think back to last January. Did you have intentions of doing more for yourself, of learning, of nourishing yourself, your mind, body, your soul? Did you have intentions of investing more time for the things that you wanted? And what happened to those? Because did you start this year again with very similar intentions? Let's go back a few years. Does this happen? What I found with many of my coaching clients is this is a repeating pattern. They're strong, they're there for everyone. They can handle what's going on in their lives. They've been able to adapt to things even through the craziness of the last several years. They've been able to roll with it and move forward. But because of all of the demands on them from everyone else, there's less and less invested in themselves. And what happens is their strength, their resilience, their ability to respond starts to wear down. They might start to snap a little more. They may start to feel more tired. They may start to feel more drained, less able to do what they could before. It has nothing to do with age. It's got to do with how much you're putting back in yourself. Resilience is not a set thing. It takes practice to keep it up, to build it up, and to keep it even at the same level, let alone grow it. And we've all had to grow our resilience because of what's happened these last 5 years. But if you keep putting yourself last, what's going to start to happen is that's going to start to wear down. You're going to be able to do less, and you're going to be less able to be there for everybody else. When I got married years ago, I went through a lot of changes. I was a bachelor well into my life. I was nearly 40 when I married. And I moved from a house that was 2,500 square feet, my space, to a smaller house where nothing was my space. I not only gained a spouse, I gained two stepsons, two cats, and moved much of my stuff into this smaller house as well. Now, it's a wonderful time, but it's also a huge time of transition and change. And what I found was I started to feel more and more stressed. And finally, I realized because I had no space for me. Because, as I say, whereas I'd had the whole place as my space, now nothing was my space. It was all shared. Every night, even sleeping, at some point every night, each of the boys would get uh, bad dreams, and we'd have to bring them into our bed for a little while and then take them back to their bed. And then all the other times through the night, the two cats would be running and chasing each other all throughout the house, all over the bed. I started feeling like I was living in Grand Central Station. And my spouse at the time, we had merged our businesses, so we're working together all the time as well, which was wonderful. But also, I had gone from having a fair amount of space that was my space to having nothing. And as much as I loved everything in my life, my partner, the kids, I was feeling the pressure building because I had no time for me to breathe and to ground and connect with myself. I had my meditation practice, but often my partner meditated with me as well. Even though we were each in our own meditation, you can sense another's presence. For me, I feel energy. So what I finally discovered, what I finally realized, what turned everything around was a simple black recliner that I had brought with me. And what I did was I usually woke up at 6 in the morning. I woke up 15 minutes before and I went and sat in that recliner. And for that 15 minutes, it was just my space. It was all for me. Everyone else was asleep, and this was my space. If the cats came to me in that 15 minutes, I'm sorry. This was not that time. I'd put them down and I would just sit and be present in my space. And that 15 minutes transformed everything. It didn't take hours. It didn't take massive shifts of this or that. All it took was this 15 minutes a day. And I was able to breathe, center myself, do the what I needed to connect with my own resources so that I could enjoy and be fully in everything else that I was sharing with my spouse and my stepkids. But I couldn't have done that if I hadn't invested that 15 minutes in me first. So what this brings to mind is a concept developed by Stephen Covey. And what he talked about, one of his examples, he has the square that he breaks into four quadrants. So if you can imagine, there's a square and there's a line down the middle vertically, and there's a line across horizontally. And across the top, he wrote on the left-hand side, he wrote important, and on the right-hand side, not important. And along the left side, at the top, he wrote urgent, and on the bottom, he wrote not urgent. And so what happened was you've got four quadrants. So you had the top left quadrant, which was urgent and important. The bottom left quadrant were things that were important but not urgent. The top right quadrant were things that were urgent but uh, sorry, important but not urgent to you. And at the bottom right were things that were not important or not urgent. Not important to you, not urgent. What he found is that a lot of people live most of their time in quadrant one, in things that are urgent and important, the crises, things that have to be done now, totally resolved, all of the deadlines you have at work, all of the different things that you have to jump and respond to. If someone gets sick at home, you have to deal with that. If you've got to pay a bill in a certain time, you're past due, that's urgent. You got to do that. If you've got to get a report ready at work, you had for a certain deadline, that's urgent and it's important. You got to deal with it. And that can create a lot of stress. The there's another quadrant of things that are urgent, but they're not important to you. They're important to somebody else. So, for example, at work, it could be a report that somebody else really needs. It's important to them and it's urgent to them, but it's just a pain for you because you've got to do this and it's impinging on your time. Then you've got the quadrant two, which is all of the things that are important, but it's not urgent. It's not critical that you do it right now, this minute. And things like that could include in the workplace training and development. It could include listening to podcasts. It could be thinking strategically. It could be time with family, time with your kids, time with friends, all sorts of leisure activities, exercise. Really important, but if you don't do it today and you do it tomorrow, it's fine, not a big deal. And then you have quadrant four, which is to me sort of the dead zone, things that aren't important, things that aren't urgent. So that's like when you're fried and you're binge watching Netflix until it asks you if you're awake still, if you're still there. So it's things that just are just filling time. Now, here's the thing. I believe a lot of people are dealing with a bit of an addiction here. They are so hooked on quadrant one, things that are urgent and important, the crises that they have to deal with. Every time you're in that stress response produces 30 hormonal and 1,300 chemical changes that I believe you become addicted to. Because how many times a day do these little crises happen? Each time, all of these chemical responses happen, and some of these continue for hours. That's why if you're feeling pressure at work, you still feel that in your body when you go home. Uh, People talk about leaving work at work, but you can't if those chemicals are still roiling around in your body for hours afterwards, unless you know very specific techniques that will let you do that. So what a lot of people do when they run out of urgent things that are important to them, they jump on urgent things that are important to others, but not to them, so that they can get caught in that and get that chemical rush, that hit again. And what tends to happen is people bounce around in those two quadrants and crisis after crisis. I've got to do everything frantically, running around everything. And then they burn out into quadrant four and sitting and binge watching um, Netflix and eating, some Haagen-Dazs chocolate, whatever, ice cream till you zone totally out. And then you go crisis, 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 crash, crisis, 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 crash. The one quadrant that most people, and certainly the most effective people, the most ineffective people avoid is quadrant two, which are the things that are important but not urgent. It's important to think strategically. It's important to exercise. It's important to have time with family. It's important to have your own practice of meditation or whatever it is that you do that fills your well, that builds your resilience. But again, if you don't do it today and you do it tomorrow, not such a big deal. You'll survive. But if that tomorrow keeps getting put off and off and off and off and off until it's off into the sunset, then you've got a problem. What happens is this quadrant is about preparing the firefighting, the fire resistance. How do you make sure that the fires don't happen in quadrant one so that you're in crises? So if you're spending time, you're investing time in quadrant two, which is the important, not urgent stuff, what that will lead to is fewer crises. The problem is initially you're still dealing with the crises because you didn't do that planning work up front. You didn't do that resilience building up front. And you have to invest time in quadrant two stuff that's going to make sure there's not as many fires down the road. The other thing that's going to happen there is you're going to step out of the stress response. And there, I believe we do have to deal with breaking an addictive factor, that we need to break that need to be in that state. And that takes work. That takes commitment. And I think that's another reason we don't allow ourselves to stop and just do stuff for us. We're always focused on what are we doing for others. We're helping everybody else in the world. Covey has a great example when he used to speak about this. He would bring out a glass tank, sort of like a fish tank, and he would put in these big fist-sized rocks into the tank, and he'd fill it up until it was to the top with these, and he'd ask the audience if is it full, and they'd go yeah, and then he would bring out a bucket full of gravel and shake it in, and then he'd ask, is it full? And they sort of wised up a bit then, and they'd say, no, maybe not. And that's when he brings out some sand and shakes that in, asks, is it full? Some people say yes, some people say no. Then he brings out water and pours the water in. The thing about this is, if he had started with the gravel and the sand and the water, could he have gotten all of those big fist-sized rocks in the tank? No, because it would have filled up the bottom. You couldn't have got as much. Those big rocks are the quadrant two activities. They're the things that nourish you, that build you up, that allow you to think strategically, that allow you to be responsive, that allow you to be supportive. You have to schedule those first, and then you schedule everything else around it. Going back actually to my marriage, before I got married, we had moved the wedding date up a bit, and it was going to be in our backyard. And then I got some work, and it turned out the month before the wedding, I was out of town every week for 3, 4 days working with clients. And my fiance at the time was getting kind of stressed. And so what I did was at that time, I got one of those month in view calendars, the things that go on the wall, and which we used a lot back then. And we had a list of all the things we had to do to prepare for the wedding a month from now. So what I did was we put the calendar on the floor and I took the list from my fiance and I put it down on the ground. And which definitely stressed her out significantly. And the first thing I did was put in dates for her and me to go on dates, dates for her, me, and her stepson so that we could have family time, time with her parents, time with my parents, time with friends, things that we needed and wanted. Then I got the list. And you know what? Everything fit. But here's the thing, if we had started with a list, all we would have been doing was running frantically all month. We would maybe have gotten one or two dates, if that. Uh, and we would just have been a whole lot more stressed. But the first thing was to put in those times and then fit everything else in. And you know what's amazing is it all fits. It all gets in there. Everything that needs to. So, what I'm asking you is if you're always the one who's there for everybody else, what is it that nurtures you? What is it that builds your well? What is it that fills your well, or that gives you the resources you need so that you can be there for yourself and for others? And not about making huge changes, but like my black leather recliner, how can you take 15 minutes to really, those 15-minute bites? It may be 5 minutes for you, it may be 10, it may be half an hour here and there, maybe an hour once a week. What is it that you can do for you that's going to fill that well? What is it that you can invest in you, in yourself, so that next year in January, when you look back, you can see how much more you've accomplished because you gave yourself the resources you needed to do that. That you could be there for others, absolutely. I'm not saying don't do that, but you start by being there for yourself. Just like on the plane, you put the mask on yourself first, and then you help others. So, what is it that you can do that's going to help you, that's going to nourish you, that's going to build your resilience, that's going to take away the stuff that wears you down? In a moment, I'll tell you about one thing that you could do that will just take a few minutes a day that will completely erase probably the biggest builder of stress and destroyer of resilience that there is out there.
Check it out, check it out. Oh, are you ready for this?
So let me ask you a question. How many of you have difficulty sleeping at night because your head chatter just won't stop? That it just goes on and on and on and on. And then during the day, you're beating yourself up for things you said or didn't say in a meeting, you're stressing about what's going to come. You're running all these scenarios through in your head. That head chatter, that monkey mind, is probably the biggest destroyer of resilience there is. And it's also a huge factor in destroying effective sleep. And sleep is the biggest builder of resilience that's out there today. I've developed a Jedi mind trick that lets you stop it just like that whenever you want. And all you have to do is invest about 5 minutes a day for a week at different times, a minute here, a minute there, a couple of minutes there, each day for about a week. And you'll be able to build a habit that anytime you want, you just shut that head chatter off. So you can roll over, you go to sleep, you stop beating yourself up about what you didn't do or didn't say, or what you did say that wasn't appropriate. And you stop beating yourself up about what's coming up and stressing out over the worst case scenario, and instead prepare for the best. All you have to do is a free e-course I've created at www.silentselftalk.com. And you can get this course for free. It'll lay everything out that you need to be able to address this number one risk to resilience so that you can build your resilience with just a few minutes a day. Check it out. Let me know what you think.
I got the energy, it's all I need to finish. And everyone that knows me knows that I can do this. Yeah, I know